Today it is our joy to be speaking with the Reverend Monsignor Professor Thomas Halík. Professor Halík is Professor of Sociology at the Charles University in Prague. He's pastor of St. Salvador Church in Prague, and he's also co-founder and president of the Czech Christian Academy. Professor Halík has written many books, including the book that we'll be discussing today, The Afternoon of Christianity, The Courage to Change, which is available from University of Notre Dame Press earlier this year in March of 2024. Professor Halík, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Professor Halík, I first heard of you when my father-in-law gave me this wonderful book in English, Patience with God, which you wrote in 2010. You've written many, many books, but this last book that you've written, The Afternoon of Christianity, is particularly about the experience of faith in the context of secularity. Please tell us, why did you decide to write The Afternoon of Christianity?
So I decided it some years ago. I'm deeply convinced that we stand at the crossroad, at one of the turning points of human history, and history of Christianity is part of it. It's time of very dangerous threats and challenges, but also time of new hopes. And I think it's a very, very, very demanding and interesting time. Carl Gustav Jung, the founder of depth psychology, he used the metaphor of a day to describe the course of individual human life. Childhood is a morning. Then comes the middle time, a middle day crisis, and then the afternoon of life, the age of maturity. And I apply this metaphor to the course of history of Christianity. The morning is the pre-modern period, time for building the institution and the doctrinal structures of Christianity, of the church. Then comes the age of modernity, secularization. It was the time of shaking. All these structures were shaken. And our postmodern time is a call to the afternoon of Christianity, to greater maturity and depth. For me, also the central story of the Christianity is, of course, Easter story, death and resurrection. And it's for me a hermeneutical key to understand the history of Christianity and the challenges of our time. I write about the history of Christianity as ongoing incarnation. Incarnation, it means the inculturation of the Christian faith. And then the ongoing mystery of the cross, suffering and death. The secularization is in a way exculturation of Christianity. And the end, the death of the previous form of Christianity, kenosis, self-emptying, and the renewals are the ongoing mystery of resurrection and Pentecost, the ever new presence of the risen Christ and his Spirit through the renewal of Christianity. I think I like the scene from the Gospel according to St. Mark, the women at the empty tomb of Christ. The women hear the question, why do you seek the living among the dead? And challenge, go to Galilee, and there you will see him. I think many forms of church today resemble the empty tomb. Our task is not to weep, to stay at the tomb and look for Jesus in the world of the past. No, we should seek and find the Galilee of today, where we can meet Christ in new forms, in a surprising forms. Resurrection was a surprising. Jesus came even to his nearest and dearest in a new form. They were not able to recognize him at first. And I think the Galilee of today is the space between the very traditional Christianity and the dogmatic atheism. And also there are some apatheists, the people that are apathetic toward faith and religion. But there is an ever growing world of seekers, of the people, and they are looking, they have many questions, they are open-minded, they were perhaps disappointed with the churches. But hope and resignation, trust and fear are competing in their heads and hearts. And I think this is the Galilee of today. We should go there. And our mission is not to push them into the existing structures, the mental structures, institutional structures of the church, but to enlarge the structures, to be open. Our task is to accompany those people in partners, in dialogue. And I think this call of Pope Francis for the common way, synodos, for the synodal renewal of Christianity, it is the answer to this situation.
I love that metaphor, the Galilee of today, where in a surprising way we can meet the risen Lord. What a fascinating and compelling metaphor. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, in your book, The Afternoon of Christianity, it's clear that you believe that Christianity is in a crisis, and you name two forces particularly that shape that crisis. You name the sexual abuse scandals of the last several decades and also the COVID crisis of 2020. Now, if I may take the liberty of reading a paragraph or two here from your book just to set the stage. You write this on pages 54 to 55. We have seen that the modern form of religion was not the first and will probably not be the last sociocultural incarnation of the Christian faith in history. This form of religion was created by the secular age early on, but its plausibility was eroded and collapsed at the very end of the modern age, which occurred at the turn of the 1970s. It seems to me that this process is coming to a head in our time with two phenomena that are, however, more its symptom than its cause or essence. One is the exposure of the pandemic of sexual, psychological, and spiritual abuse in the church, and the other is the experience of churches being shut and services suspended during the coronavirus pandemic. The former points to a crisis of the status of the clergy, calls for an end to clericalism and a rethink of the role of priests and the relationship between priests and laity in the church. The second was a call for Christians not to rely solely on the service of the clergy, but to seek new forms of experience in celebrating the mystery of faith beyond the traditional liturgy and sacral spaces. We have said that the Christian faith already seems to be at odds with the second historical form of religion. Will it find or create another form of religion, or is the time coming for a non-religious Christianity? Was the religious form of Christianity only one phase of its historical development? Close quote. Help us understand why you particularly identify these two forces, sexual abuse scandals and also the COVID crisis, as the two primary representations of the crisis of religion in our own time.
For me, crisis is always an opportunity, a chance, a blessed opportunity for a renewal, for a new beginning. And I think Christianity today faces the need for a new reformation. And especially these two phenomena are important. This abuse crisis and this experience with COVID. The situation of Christianity today resemble the situation just before the Reformation in the 16th century. There were two reformations, the Protestant reformations of Martin Luther and the Catholic Reformation, inspired by the great mystics like Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Ignatius of Loyola. In the medieval church, there were scandals involving the sale of indulgences. At first, it seems it's one of many affairs. However, these controversies concerning the indulgences led to the deep problems. And then came the Reformation, the necessity to reform the whole structure of the medieval church. The reform of the institutions of church and also of theology. And today, there are these sexual and financial scandals in the church, especially the Catholic Church. And it plays a very similar role. At the beginning, it was seen as the problem of the individuals, the sexual misuse and so on. But it led to the insight that the renewal, the radical renewal of the church is needed. Pope Francis speaks about the synodal renewal of the church to turn from the clericalism, from the church as a bureaucratic, rigid institution, into a new form of the church, church as a flexible network of mutual communication between clergy and lay people, but also the communication of the church with other systems of society. It's a call for a deeper and broader ecumenism. And the second phenomena is the experience of church in time of the pandemic crisis, coronavirus. It was a time when many churches during the lockdown were closed. I wrote a book, Time of the Empty Churches. And I saw this phenomenon as a prophetic warning sign. If the church will not change, many churches will be empty and closed. Even today, in many countries, many churches, many monasteries, many seminaries are half empty or empty and closed. And it reminds me also a situation in the medieval Christianity, in Middle Age Christianity. The church in the Middle Ages knows also the empty churches and closed churches. It was the time of interdict. Interdict was the church's punishment. It was sort of the general strike of the whole church apparatus. And services were not celebrated, the churches were closed. But in that time, the Christians were seeking another way how to practice the faith, how to find the direct direction with God. Outside of this mediating by the church structures, it was a necessity. It was the time of developing of the mysticism, Devotio Moderna, and other mystical streams. And it was one of the sources of Reformation, of this Catholic Reformation, and also the Lutheran Reformation. And I think now is also the time, and it was especially in the time of lockdown, that the people were looking for a new way of the personal relation with Christ. So the mystics and reformators offer the direct personal connection with Christ. And I think it is now also the challenge in this renewal of Christianity. Some 2 months ago, I was in Rome at the synod of the parish priest from all over the world. And I mentioned there the experience with the problem that we have very few new priest vocations. There are for hundreds of years, there are so prayers for the new priest vocations, and the number of priests is always going down. Does it mean that God does not hear our prayer, or we don't hear what the answer of God? I quoted there the old nice Jewish joke. One lady asked the rabbi, Rabbi, I prayed 10 years for to win in the lottery, but God did not answer. And the rabbi said, no, God answered. He said, no. And I think maybe that the answer of God is, I don't want this type of priest ministry, the education of priest candidates. Look at the new creative way. If I shut the door, says God, I will open another door. And I think now is the time of the crisis of many traditional phenomena of the church. It's time to look for the creative new answers to God's vocation. All the time to seek the will of God.
Professor Halík, you see the present age not only as a time of crisis, but also as a time of hope. And you write this is from page 20 of your book. I consider crisis a time of opportunity, an opportune moment, or that is kairos. You use at that point the Greek word kairos. Two Greek words refer to different understandings of time. Chronos refers to the quantum of time, the sequence of hours, days, and years, the flow of time, measurably by our clocks and calendars. The word kairos points to the quality of time. Kairos is the time of opportunity, a time to do something, a time of coming, a time of visitation. You then introduce us to kairology. Help us understand, if you would, what is kairology and how does that help us understand the church's present moment?
Jesus instructed his disciples to learn to read signs of the times. They are still to listen, in the words of the Apocalypse, to what the Spirit is saying to the churches, to still be open to the guidance of the Spirit of God. This is the prophetic task, the prophetic role of the church. The God of the Bible revealed himself in the ever new events of history, of the history which is happening, of the contemporary history. This is the difference between the God of the Bible and the pagan gods of the natural religions. The pagan gods reveals in the cycles of the nature, in the ever recurring cycles of the nature, and the mechanism of the eternal return of the same. I understand kairology as the theological hermeneutics, a theological interpretation of events in society and culture. It is sort of political theology, if you want, or a public theology. It presupposes a constant conversation of theology with the social sciences, especially and this approach of the kairology is especially the contemplative approach to reality. The word religio in Latin has two meanings, admits a double interpretation. To reconnect, to connect again, religere, and to reread, to read again. The religion as a religio in the sense of religare, to reconnect, is an integrating force. And it was the role of Christianity for many centuries to be the common language of the society. But there is also this second meaning of the word religio, and it is another possible role of religion in society. Religio in the sense of relegere, to read again, means above all to perceive anew, deeply, attentively, the events in our world, to look for a wider context and the deeper meaning. I think it can offer an alternative to the suggestive populist ideologies. It can offer a different language, different hermeneutics, but it presupposes a contemplative approach to reality. A contemplative reading of the signs of the times includes the capacity for inner distance, for inner freedom, freedom from our own prejudices, for the ability to humbly acknowledgement that our situation is limited, our perspective, our personal perspective is limited. We have just, all of us, just imperfect perception and evaluation of the world. But it should not lead us to resignation and relativism. It means to encourage the willingness to empathy with other people's attitudes. We need the dialogue with others. In the dialogue with others, in the common way, we can enrich and broaden our own perspective.
Thank you so much for that response, Professor Halík. Professor Halík, some commentators claim that religion is making a comeback, but you disagree. You write this on page 80 and 81 of your book. Is religion making a comeback? I disagree with the proposition for at least two reasons. First, religion is not coming back because it never left. It didn't go away. It didn't disappear. It was still there. Throughout its history, it simply kept changing and transforming itself. It merely temporarily escaped the attention of academics, the media, and the public of the Western world due to the influence of the self-fulfilling prophecy of secularization theories. However, most of these theories, as already mentioned, focused solely on certain forms of religion and overlooked others. The second reason is that in much of our world, what now fills the spiritual space vacated by traditional religion, or after the era of harsh secularization in communist countries, is by no means the same as what was there in the past, in pre-modern times. Indeed, the alleged, quote, return of a religion, unquote, has come as a great surprise both to the proponents of the theories of radical secularization, who no longer expected any future for religion, and to those representatives of traditional religious institutions who do not acknowledge the historical changing nature of religion. So my question for you, Professor Halík, is based on your life and ministerial experience, what do you expect the church to look like in other Western countries as secularism continues to run its course?
I try to distinguish between secularity and secularism. Secularism is an ideological interpretation of the process of secularization. In the view of kairology, the theological hermeneutics, secularization is one aspect of the God's important activity, the purification of Christianity and the church. We should embrace the cross, death, and go to transformation, and to see death as a transformation. The two former forms of Christianity must die. First, the medieval Christianity, the Christianity as a Christianitas, the church linked to the state power and secular power. And the second is the modern Christianity as one of the world views, a closed ideological system, an instrument of the culture wars against similar ideological systems of modernity. This Catholicism of modernity as the contra-culture against the modern culture, philosophy, science. It must also die. This age needs Christianity as a way, as a path, a journey from the surface to the depth. If faith is a process of conversion, metanoia, conversion, transformation from the self-certainness of our small ego to the deeper center, no longer live myself, but Christ lives in me, said the St. Paul. Then the church must also free herself from the self-centeredness, from the collective narcissism, to open communication of the way. Communio viatorum. Church should be the communio viatorum, the communion of the pilgrims. And this transformation is the essential idea of the synodal renewal of the church. It's continuation of the ecclesiology of the Vatican II. Synodality means synhodos, the common way. This way must be always open because it has an eschatological goal. It's a difference. It's unlike the political and ideological utopias. We cannot accept any form of society, any form of church, any form of theology, any form of scientific knowledge as a perfect, closed, and unchangeable. We are always on the way.
Professor Halík, I find this phenomenally interesting, and I need to ask a clarifying question here. Did I hear you say that this vision of the church, communio viatorum, this communion of pilgrims, is Pope Francis's interpretation of the ecclesiology of Vatican II?
Yes, it is the deepening of this ecclesiology. But many of the church's initiative came too late. I think also the Vatican II came too late. The church began to address the social issues in the industrial age, in the social encyclicals of the popes. Uh, 50 years after Karl Marx, the offer of partnership with modern culture and society, the Vatican II, came at a time when the modern age was ending already. And the offer of partnership with the modern culture and society at Vatican II came also too late. It was the time when the modern age was already ending, and a modern man has very little interest in marriage with the church. The offer of partnership with modernity was, remember, the first sentence of the Pastoral Constitution, Gaudium et Spes, that the church offered to the modern man fidelity, empathy. But this offer was not there was no reciprocity by the modern world. Pope Francis called for synodality, a common journey, synodos, especially in his encyclical Fratelli tutti, is a call for a deeper and broader ecumenism. This ecumenism also seeks empathy and welcoming towards our planet, towards to make an oikumene, a common living space, a common home for the human family, to live together with other forms of life on earth. I think it is the message of the Fratelli Tutti.
This is so important. Let's focus in on Vatican II just a little bit more. And what I hear you saying in this passage that I'm about to read is indeed that this response of synodality, this response of this interpretation of the communio viatorum, that the church is this community of pilgrims, that it came too late. Well, let's dive into that. It came too late to preserve the institutional structures of the church, but is it still theologically the best thing to do at the present moment? Let me read a passage that you've written here on page 54. You write this: "The effort to reconcile the church with modernity came too late, and paradoxically, it came at a moment when modernity was already on its way out. The church's effort to achieve ecumenicity in a threefold sense, that is, unity among Christians, dialogue with other religions, and rapprochement with secular humanism, with non-believers, never got more than halfway. Continuing on this path remains the task for the afternoon of Christianity." My question to you then is, what are the next steps for ecumenical theology and ecumenical dialogue?
I think, in fact, many of the church's initiative came too late. The church began to address the social issues of the industrial society 50 years after Karl Marx. And also the offer of the Vatican II to go together with the modern men, there was the famous opening sentence of the Constitution, Gaudium et Spes, the very important document of Vatican II. It was like the marriage war the Church promised to the modern people, to the modern world, solidarity, fidelity. But it came too late. The modern man has at that time no more interest, very little interest in this marriage with the church. There was practically no reciprocity from the side of the modern culture. So the Pope Francis' call for synodality is a deepening of this intuition of the Vatican II. The Pope Francis offered a new and broader and deeper ecumenism. Not only the ecumenism, not only the communication with other churches, but with the whole human family. It is especially in the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. And not only with the human family, but also with the planet Earth. We should create from our planet oikumene, a common living space, a common home, not only for the human family, but also offer our communication, our respect to the all forms of life on the earth.
Professor Halík, you note that Avery Cardinal Dulles was helpful to you as you came to be an interpreter of Vatican II. You specifically cite that Avery Cardinal Dulles' hermeneutic of continuity and hermeneutic of discontinuity was very helpful. Would you help us understand what Dulles' hermeneutic of continuity and hermeneutic of discontinuity, how that can help us understand Vatican II?
The Second Vatican Council, like every new event in history, can be interpreted in both ways. As something new, which brings something of the past, and something which is really new. I think it's like a discussion of whether a bottle of water is half full or half empty. This optics is also influenced by how thirsty you are right now, and your need and desire to drink water. Why I know that many of the impulses of the last council remained unfilled, I'm deeply convinced that today we must respond especially to the new challenges. The world has changed radically since the last council, since the 60s of the last century. And the changes are becoming more profound and more rapid all the time.
Professor Halík, on page 113, you make this remarkable claim. You write, out of all the church documents in Christian history, the most urgent call for ecumenical openness was made by Pope Francis in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti on October 4, 2020. This is a remarkable claim. Please help us understand what is the heart of this encyclical Fratelli Tutti?
The basic message of this encyclical is the call to the universal fraternity of all men and women. The Church understands itself as a symbol, a sign, the sacramental symbol, and the instrument of the unity of whole humanity in Jesus Christ. But it is the eschatological goal. There is a great difference between this idea and the ideologies and utopias in the secular world. It is necessary to work for this goal, but at the same time to know that is not realistic to realize this goal in the history. Any attempt at heaven on earth is a dangerous illusion. So the church must encourage the way to this eschatological goal, but at the same time warn against the chiastic expectation, warn against the idolatry of the future. The provocative novelty of this encyclical Fratelli Tutti is also the assertion that the plurality of religion is God's intention. So this idea may be the basis of a new culture of mutual recognition and interreligious cooperation.
Thank you for alerting us to the significance of this encyclical and our need to grapple with this and read this document. Thank you so much. Professor Halík, on page 151, you write this. You write, the main challenge for ecclesial Christianity today is how to turn from religion to spirituality. While the traditional institutional forms of religion often resemble drying riverbeds, interest in spirituality of all kinds is a surging current that is eroding old riverbanks and carving out new channels. You also mention on page 143, you write this is why prayer is important for faith, which is a constant search for God. So I guess the question that I'd like to ask is then, what is the role of prayer in this turn to spirituality that you see?
I'm deeply convinced that the first task of reform of the Christianity is to deepen spirituality, a new way of experiencing God in prayer. This experience can be the source of a renewal of theological thinking. We need to return to the principle lex orandi, lex credendi. It means the spirituality, prayer, is the foundation of faith and theology. Especially contemplative prayer makes it possible to seek and find God in all things. God in all things. This is the experience of the Ignatius spirituality that is very near to heart of Pope Francis, who is the Jesuit. The God of enlightenment, of the God of deism, the God somewhere outside our world, is truly dead. One of the many different conceptions of God presented in the Bible, I find in St. Paul's conception, which is, I think, the most inspiring for our time. God is around all and within us. In him we live, breathe, move, and have our being. I think it is the inspirational image of God for our time. God not somewhere behind reality, but as a depth and source of reality. God which is acting in the history, in the nature, in the church and outside the church, in our hearts. And I think the spirituality is the sensitivity toward this omnipresence of God. We need a culture of the spiritual this distinguishing spirituality, to listen and to contemplate the signs, the steps of God in our world. And this way of prayer, this way of contemplation is a living source for theological thinking, but also for our practice in the world. I think the renewal, Pope Francis said, the sinner renewal, it is to invent a new way how to be church in this world, how to be Christian in our time. To be Christian, it's always innovative. Yes, we have the very important heritage, and we have the responsibility for this heritage, but we have also the responsibility to be open to God, to the Spirit of God, who is always present and working. And our responsibility is the ability to respond to this.
Professor Halík, we are deeply grateful for you sharing your time and insights with us. Many of the things that you've said are very difficult and will require a lot of careful reflection on my part, on the part of our viewers, to fully ingest and understand, to work out in careful reflection. But thank you so much for your passion to understand what God is doing at this present moment in our world, and your courage to look to the future, knowing that the Spirit of God has not given up on the church. We are so grateful for your time.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.